Welcome back to the Titanium Hangar. This is Mike, and I'm coming at you with another video. This time I want to talk to you about future possible Haslab projects. And yes, you probably want to hear more about Unicron, but guess what? Unicron's almost done. We got less than a week. And let's look to the future of all of this wonderful stuff. I've made a list of 10 things that I think would do well as a Haslab project, and the number one would be the 6-inch version of G.I. Joe, and I would like to see them on vintage style packaging, which would be easily opened and reclosed, kind of like we saw with the Gentle Giant stuff that's going on. So what characters would you, well, you know, there'd be like a Firefly, a Scarlet, a Destro, a Cobra Commander, and you know the Cobra Commander would have to have like a swappable head, and the Baroness, and Duke, and of course Zartan, and of course a Snake Eyes, and without, you know, Snake Eyes, you've got to have Storm Shadow. The cool thing about doing a G.I. Joe relaunch of this 6-inch line would say that this could start off the 6-inch line and then start making it mass produced with other characters. Now these would have to be completely different figures, different molds, different everything than if they made a mainline one. So if this sparked off a lot of interest and they went with a mainline 6-inch Joe, those would have to be completely different. They'd have to remake all of the main characters, and they would have to look different because you can't have a Haslab project go hit retail because the next Haslab project just won't go off the ground. But this has been one of the most requested things for Haslab on my channel, so I figured I'd throw it out there. So next on the list would be the Transformers arc, and I know a lot of people really want to see some sort of an arc playset, and it probably would be a Chug playset. I'd like to see a Masterpiece playset, or even just a ship big enough that Masterpiece would make sense, but that would be awesome. And I know a lot of people talk about it, a lot of people say they'd like it. Would they fund this in a Haslab project? That's a question. Next up is a Death Star. And yes, I made my 9 Death Star project, and I might have to revisit that and make another video about that because I've done a few things to it since then, but would a Haslab Death Star really sell? And I know Kenner did a great job with the first Death Star, but it was kind of like a slice of the pie. And a lot of people feel like we'd get a full Death Star out of a Haslab project. But then again, does the Death Star look too much like a Unicron? Who knows? But that's what always gets brought up every time someone talks about the next Haslab project. Next up, I have a m.a.s.k. Boulder Hill. This wouldn't be just a remake of the original Boulder Hill. This thing would be bigger, more massive, more things to it, and you'd have all kinds of other features that this didn't have. But the cool thing is that fans have really stepped up and have made a lot of great things with the Boulder Hill. And they've made the Energizer table, which is awesome. Fans have made the ship that carries the vehicles. And in the end, Haslab could make this better and restart the whole m.a.s.k. community, because guess what? People want that. Next up, you know, another one of the original Hasbro franchises, G.I. Joe, the headquarters. The headquarters always seem to be pretty lame. Although, yes, if it's all 100% complete, in good condition, it is sort of cool, but in the end, it's still kind of lame. They could have done so much more with this. If you compare this to the Flagg or the Terrordrome or most of the other playsets out there, this isn't all that great. If they made a Haslab one, it would be awesome. And by the way, why not? why not make an awesome headquarters for G.I. Joe that lives up to the potential, and it's so much better than this thing. Next up, a lot of people say they want to see city bots that are realized to the full size. And I know we have an actual Titan Metroplex. We have the Haslab Unicron on its way, no matter what that thing's coming, by the way. And the Haslab Unicron is only going to be 27 inches. Would we get this a 4-foot or 3-foot or a gigantic version of Metroplex that's made to almost a masterpiece scale? Well, a lot of people feel city bots should be tackled in a Haslab project. Next up, the Rebel Blockade Runner is one of those almost holy grail items. One of those items that you just didn't see very much of. They made like a model of it, but they didn't make a toy. Now, they planned to make a toy. And wouldn't it be awesome if they made a huge one, and this toy that works with 3 3/4 inch was a throw-in? Mind blown. $600 for a 4-foot long Rebel Blockade Runner. Well, Mike, why is the Rebel Blockade Runner even anything important? Well, it's important because it's the first ship you see in the first movie. It's linked from the prequels to the original trilogy, and it still garners a lot of people wanting it today. And by the way, this original toy would have been cool if they made it. I don't know why they didn't. Next on the list is the USS Flagg. Unlike everything else on this list, I don't think that this would actually be bigger. It would be smaller. It would be like 4 foot. Instead of being 7.5 foot, like the vintage one, it'd be 4 foot. The problem is that they did a great job in the vintage. You can still get a vintage one, missing some parts or whatever, for under $1,000. And for Hasbro to try to make, 8, 9, 10,000 of these things, it would be really hard. The only reason I even discuss it is because it gets brought up more than anything. The number one thing brought up for the next Haslab is USS Flagg. I think a lot of collectors look at the little pieces here and there and everywhere that are missing. To get a complete one's real expensive, but you can get one missing, a handful of the expensive pieces, like that back rail and some of the parts on antenna, a handful of pieces here and there. You can still get one for a good price. But it's impressive, and I would be in on one from Haslab. Next on my list is the Visionaries Dagger Assault. And this thing here is probably the most expensive Visionaries item out there. And if Haslab did a Visionaries Dagger Assault, they would need to throw in a handful of figures. They need to have a ridiculous amount of articulation. It all needs to be like some vintage style cards and boxes and all that stuff to make us feel like we've just recaptured our childhood in the Visionaries world and all of that great stuff. And a little bit of updated modern technology with it would be great. That would be outstanding. But, this is a holy grail for a lot of Visionary collectors, and it would be a holy grail if it was made as a Haslab. It would be amazing. For $500 or $600, they could do great stuff with it. And I'd like to see it a little bigger than the vintage one, and I'd like to see like a whole slew of figures with it. Next up, I would like to see Gobots. I would like to see masterpiece Gobots made by none other than Takara, because Hasbro and Takara go in together, and make them 9-inch tall. I want Psykill and Leader 1 to stand next to Optimus Prime, MP44, and all those great things. That would be awesome. Gobots deserve a little bit of spotlight, and I think they'd sell well. And guess what? If Haslab went all out and said, we're going to make 6 main characters, and you don't want them because you don't back them, they'll never make them. Just like we discussed with the Joe stuff, these would have to be their own figures, their own thing. The truth is, they're probably past the 6. There wouldn't be a whole lot of interest in all the other characters, and it might just be a one and done. But who knows? maybe it would start something new. And if it did start something new, then those cannot be the same figures that go in the store, and that's an issue. But then again, if you're looking at Masterpiece stuff's not going to make it on a Walmart shelf. Let me know what you think of my list. Let me know what you want to see in the next Haslab project. Like, subscribe, and of course, Todd Hanger out.